morning, kids, and welcome to Stuff Kelly's Interested in. Today, we're going to be talking about medieval history, specifically the Battle of Bannockburn, which was June 23rd and 24th, 1314. And today, my first guest is Lindsay. She's going to tell us a little bit about... Oh, hi, Lindsay. I was just telling the kids how you're going to tell us a little bit about what led up to the battle.
Hey, Kelly. Yes, that's what I'm going to do today. See, Robert the Bruce had been crowned King of Scotland, but unfortunately, Edward I didn't like this very much. So Edward I essentially routed out the Scottish king from his throne. Robert the Bruce didn't like this very much. He wanted his throne back. So, for many years, he sat around capturing and taking all of these English castles that were on the Scottish border. The only castle really left that was of any consequence was the Castle of Stirling. You know, this was basically an impenetrable fortress that he really wanted. However, siege warfare is really kind of boring after a while.
Where did you say they were? I mean, no one wants to be fighting and stuff. Like, why didn't they just stop? I mean, when I get bored, I just stop what I'm doing and I go outside and do something fun.
Well, that's what they kind of agreed to do. You see, the English and the Scottish came together in a pact that they agreed that they wouldn't fight for a year. However, if the castle did not receive English reinforcement by midsummer of 1314, then the castle would be surrendered to the Scottish. So do you agree to surrender this castle to the Scottish siege by midsummer of 1314 if you receive no relief?
Okay, we're pretty bored here.
Okay, so could you tell me a little bit more about like the people who were involved? Like, surely it wasn't just like all of England, like, you know, reaching out its little peninsula hand, shaking hands with Scotland. Like, obviously there had to be some people involved.
As I said before, Robert the Bruce was the dethroned king of the Scots. He's our bigwig for the Scottish side. He wanted to reclaim the Scottish throne. And then on the other side, the English side, our bigwig is Edward II. He was Edward I's son. However, Edward I was the king that took the throne from the Scottish originally in the hands of the English. Edward II wasn't nearly as, how we say, tough as his father. He did not have the noble support, and he wasn't as military-minded.
So what happened? Did the English receive the reinforcements they needed by the time the truce was going to be over?
Even though Edward II wasn't that military-minded, he still wasn't going to let the stronghold of a castle like Stirling fall. So, of course, he sent the reinforcements. He, in fact, sent a lot of reinforcements. Some numbers are as high as 100,000 extra troops. We're pretty sure that's exaggeration. Most put it about 2,500. That was a heavy cavalry, infantry, and longbowmen.
Well, thank you for joining us, Lindsay. That was really informative. Next, we have our medieval battle strategist specialist, Patrick. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Good to have you here. So when Lindsay left off, we were talking about how the British were approaching the Scottish castle of Stirling. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, so the British, you know, they were marching all this way to get to Stirling Castle by the 24th, the day that Mowbray had made the agreement. And they get within about 15 miles, and they only have to go through Bannockburn, you know, and this is the 22nd. So they're close enough, and they could have, they were fine, and they would have made the agreement just in time. And meanwhile, though, the Scottish knew they were coming, and so they were camping in this like less wooded area, and they decided to move their troops into a much more heavily wooded area where they could defend much better.
Bannockburn thing you're talking about?
Well, the Bannockburn was this marshy area. Well, the Scots, they used it to their advantage. It was this marshy area where the knights couldn't, the British knights and cavalry weren't able to use it well. And the Scots, since they had a much smaller army, probably 6,000 to 7,000 troops, they didn't have any heavy cavalry. They couldn't really match up to the sheer strength of the British. They had to use strategy, and they knew they could force the British through this narrower area that's kind of marshy, and they could really utilize their pikemen, and they could really turn the tables on the British. And so they used this Bannockburn, which was just this marshy area, to their advantage.
So how did all this fighting start? I mean, why can't we all just give peace a chance?
Well, basically, the problem is they're two armies of each other. And they're two armies, there's no way they're not going to want to fight.
Is this a testosterone thing?
I don't know. I don't really want to say that. But anyways, so the way it happened in this case was Mowbray, the English leader at the castle, had observed the Scots going from poor wood to new part, the thicker wood. And what happened is, he went and told the English leader, and they decided, we're so close, why don't we just charge them, and let's go attack them. And that's how it began. And the problem was, they didn't really realize that they were kind of in the Bannockburn, in the marshy area, and so they charged the Scots, and the Scots had dug holes for them.
Okay. This is a trap. And we need to cover the trap.
They'd taken some preparations, and the pikemen really just laid waste on the cavalry. So after that, that main first charge, the first engagement, both sides kind of went back. They recovered. And can you tell me? There's a really specific thing that happened. Can you tell me what it was?
Actually, I can. All right. Anyway, so this is my favorite part. The English knight, Sir Henry de Bohun, just kind of, going along. He's all heavily armored. He's on his horse. He's ready to go. Big man fighting. And then, he's wandering around, and all of a sudden, with his own two eyes, he sees the Scottish King Robert. Just kind of sitting there, going about his day. He's not armored. All he has is a battle axe. This seems like a perfect opportunity. The kind of opportunity that would launch a nobody English knight like Sir Henry into historical fame. So, what he does next is a little crazy. He charges the king. He's going at him with his lance, and he charges him, and then all of a sudden, King Robert turns around and sees all he has is his battle axe. It doesn't look like he's going to win. But he takes his battle axe, and I'm sorry, kids, for the violence, but this is just how it goes. This is history, I'm sorry. And he takes it and just goes down, hits the English guy's head and knocks him off his horse, and it kills him.
this rogue knight just decided to charge Bruce, and he pretty much laid the smackdown on him.
Laid the smack down is a good way of saying it, Patrick.
So very interesting.
Very interesting. So there were so few Scottish compared to the English that, for the Scottish to be winning like this, that must be a pretty big deal for them. Like, what more could possibly happen on day 2?
Well, the main thing to take is from day 1 that that scene of the knight charging the king was just morale raising for the Scottish. They had not only kind of beat down the English pretty well. They also just this crazy event happened that just the Scots just got totally excited. Everyone got into it. So the second day, the English were all at the same time really demoralized after they were in the swamp. They had been camping out. So
I don't like camping either, kids.
So the English were demoralized, and the Scots, they got everyone else kind of just started to join in with them, and they just got this huge momentum. And really, the second day was just a slaughter. It's not the first time, but one of the very important time when the knights were completely destroyed by the pikemen, and they were essentially chased down by the pikemen. The second day was really more of the same, but
kind of wrapping things up a little bit.
Yeah, and again, the Scottish, they finally came out of the woods, and they had they had the momentum, so they came out of the woods and decided to charge.
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad I could be of help and share some information.
Thanks. Next, we're going to bring in our special guest, T-Lock, who's going to talk a little bit about what this means, for history in general. So welcome, T-Lock.
Hello, Kelly.
We're glad to have you here today.
Nice to be here.
So what does this victory for the Scottish mean in the course of history in general?
Well, this was a huge victory for the Scots because it was a definitive step in their trying to get their independence. Even though they didn't get it for a while after that, this was a major step in the right direction, So that's why this battle is really important. And also in terms of just war tactics, it's really important that the Scots footmen just chase down the knights and their cavalry and outran them and beat them, because that stuff usually doesn't happen. So this is just really important in that sense in history.
So like you were saying, this was a really big deal for the Scottish to win, but what could have the English done differently so that maybe they might have had a chance at winning?
Basically, the English's biggest mistake was losing patience, Because the English have one of the most powerful armies in the world, and if they had chosen to fight on their own terms instead of the Scottish's terms, then they would have had a chance to win. By that I mean, if they had been patient enough to not fight on the Bannockburn, this marshy ground that the Scottish basically wanted them to fight on so that they could win, then the British would have had a chance, because their cavalry would have had a chance to really do some damage to the Scots, and yeah, basically that's it.
So what have we learned today, kids? Be patient and you won't die.
I
next week on Stuff Kelly Likes, we'll be talking about puppies. Bye!
You say you want a revolution. Well, you know, we all want to change the world. You tell me that it's evolution. Well, you know, we all want to change the world. But when you talk about destruction, don't you know that you can count me out? Don't you know it's gonna be alright? Alright. Alright. You say you got a real solution. Well, you know, we don't love to see the plan. You ask me for a contribution. Well, you know, we all doing what we can. But if you want money for people with minds that hate, all I can tell you is, brother, you have to wait. Don't you know it's gonna be